The rain was so heavy it looked like someone had punched a hole through the sky. Inai stood outside the villa gates, soaked through in less than 30 seconds. Elena stood under the porch awning, wearing the silk robe I had bought her last month. The expression on her face was colder than the rain. "Julian, you need to stay somewhere else for a while." She said it without looking at me. Her eyes were on her phone. At my feet were 3 suitcases. One for clothes, one for miscellaneous items, and one that was not even fully zipped, a charging cable poking out. She had packed them all, from the moment she went upstairs to the moment I was told to leave. No more than 15 minutes had passed. "Why?" I asked. The moment I asked, I knew it was pointless. In a black Mercedes was slowly making its way through the rain, its headlights turning the rain into white streaks. It stopped at the villa's iron gate. Adrian stepped out, holding an umbrella. He was in a sharp suit, standing in the rain. He did not look at me. Instead, he smiled at Elena, the kind of smile I recognized. It was the smile a winner gives a loser, deliberately tempered with a show of humility. "Adrian's investors are coming tomorrow," Elena said, and her tone had suddenly softened, as if she had become a different person. "He needs a quiet place to stay for a few days. It's inconvenient with you here." "This is my house," I said. Adrian finally glanced at me. His gaze was dismissive, carrying an undisguised contempt. He walked up to the porch, closed his umbrella, and brushed non-existent water droplets from his suit. "Julian, don't make this difficult for me," Elena said. She always called him Adrian. She always called me by my full name, Julian. 3 syllables, strictly business. He did not move. Elena finally lifted her head and looked at me. There was something in her eyes I had never seen before. It took me a long time afterward to figure out what it was. Impatience, the look of someone who had finally grown tired of pretending. She married me 3 years ago. Back then, Adrian had just gone bankrupt and fled overseas to escape his creditors. Elena, her heart shattered, married me. Inni thought 3 years was long enough for the scars on a person's heart to heal. What I did not know was that Adrian had come back 6 months ago. He had found Elena and told her he was going to make a comeback. After that, everything in our home changed. Elena started coming home late. She started smiling at her phone. She started taking calls on the balcony. I saw all of it. I never asked. Not because I was afraid to ask, but because I knew some things would shatter the moment I asked. But looking back now, what shattered was never about whether I asked or not. "Julian," Elena spoke again, her voice lowered this time, as if she was afraid of being overheard. "Just a few days. Once the project launches, he will move out. Please try to understand." As she said this, Adrian was already inside my living room. Through the floor-to-ceiling window, I saw him standing under the crystal chandelier, tilting his head up to examine the light I had spent 3 months of my salary on. His posture made it seem like he was looking at something that should have belonged to him all along. Inni picked up my suitcases one by one, turned around and walked into the rain. Behind me, I heard the sound of Elena closing the door. In a soft click, it was quiet, but it cut through all the noise of the storm. By the time I walked out of the villa community's main gate, my phone vibrated. It was a bank alert, notifying me that a transfer of $200,000 had been initiated. I opened it. The recipient was a corporate account under the name Adrian Technologies. Elena had initiated it. It was our joint account. Of course she knew the password. The money was probably for Adrian to entertain his investors tomorrow. Inni knew a little about his project. New energy, he called it. All hype, no substance. He was trying to package a lab-stage technology as a commercial miracle to fool venture capital. Elena believed him. Not only did she believe him, she had thrown herself into it completely. Inni found a convenience store by the roadside and bought a pack of tissues to wipe my face. The cashier, a young woman, glanced at me. She had probably never seen anyone so utterly defeated. The rain kept falling. It showed no sign of stopping. Inni crouched under the awning outside the convenience store, water dripping from my clothes without pause. The 3 suitcases were piled at my feet. The bottom of one had already softened from the rain. I had no idea if the things inside were still usable. My phone vibrated again. In a message from my assistant Mark, it was just one line. Miss Julian, the Nordic contract has been approved. The signing is scheduled for tomorrow. I glanced at it and turned the screen off. Then I scrolled to the very bottom of my contacts and found a number with no name saved. I had stored this number for 5 years and only dialed it twice. Once when my company was just starting out 5 years ago. Once on my wedding day 3 years ago to say, "Mom, I got married." This was the third time. The call connected after 2 rings. The other end was very quiet. Only a faint electric hum. I said, "It's me." There was a 2-second silence on the other end, and then a steady, deep voice answered, "Tell me." I looked up at the endless curtain of rain outside the convenience store. My tone was so calm it surprised even myself. "Look into the offshore fund Adrian is using for his financing." 3 minutes, the voice on the other end said, and then the line went dead. I put my phone away and wrung out my soaked jacket. I realized immediately it made no difference. It was still raining. The clothes were still getting wet. The convenience store was playing some old pop song about how breakups should be dignified. I crouched by the door and listened to the entire song. The lyrics were wrong. Breakups are never dignified. There is only one person who is crueler than the other. 3 minutes later, my phone screen lit up. In a text message, 3 lines. The first line read, "Adrian Technologies offshore financing entity confirmed." The second line read, "Associated fund domiciled in the Cayman Islands." The third line had only 8 words. "Freeze order ready to execute on command." I stared at the screen for a long time. The rain pounded on the suitcases at my feet. The noise was loud, but I heard nothing. Then I stood up and dialed another number. This time I said only 2 words, "Freeze it." The automatic door of the convenience store closed behind me. I stood under the awning. Rainwater poured off the tin edge like a curtain, slapping against the ground. The call screen on my phone was still lit. The duration read 47 seconds. Read that text message over and over. Every word was so light on its own, but together they carried a weight heavy enough to stop anyone's heart. At least heavy enough to stop Adrian's heart. I had been crouching too long. My legs were numb. When I stood up, my knee cracked like some rusted piece of machinery finally starting to turn again. I gathered my 3 suitcases. The one with the soaked bottom was beyond saving. Its contents had spilled everywhere. An old photo album lay open in the rain. The picture was of Elena and me in Malibu last year. She was wearing the sun hat I had bought her, smiling so wide her eyes curved into crescents. Looked at it. Did not pick it up. My phone rang, not a text, a call. It was Marcus. "Mr. Julian, did you just initiate a cross-border fund freeze?" Marcus's voice was restrained, but I had known him for 8 years. Could hear the slight tremor underneath. He was nervous. "Yes, that fund is $100 billion in dollars." He bit down hard on the words $100 billion, as if confirming I had not misspoken. "I know." There was silence on the other end for about 5 seconds. Marcus had been with me since the very beginning. He had seen me approve deals worth tens of billions without blinking. But freezing $100 billion offshore fund in one move, he had never seen that. I had never done it either. "Mr. Julian," Marcus's voice dropped even lower. "Should I notify the legal team?" In an operation of this scale, they will definitely investigate. I estimate feedback within 48 hours at the latest. "They won't need 48 hours, I said. "They will find out tomorrow." Adrian's investors were coming tomorrow. Elena had said it herself, just a few days, and he would move out once the project launched. Fine. I wanted to see how Adrian planned to launch his project with no money. Marcus fell silent again. He was used to my way of doing things, but it still caught him off guard every time. That was probably why he had been my assistant for 8 years. A person who never loses his sense of awe does not make mistakes. "Check something else for me," I said. "The 200,000 Elena transferred. Which bank did it go through?" "You'll have an answer in 3 minutes, Marcus said and hung up. The rain finally let up a little. I picked up the 2 suitcases that were still intact and walked down the road. Had walked this road every day for 3 years. Every morning from here to the BART station, every evening from the BART station back here. Elena thought my old Honda Civic was an embarrassment. She said the cheapest car in our community was at least $50,000. She told me to trade it in. I never did. Not because I could not afford to, because I did not see the point. And now, thinking back, it was not the car she was ashamed of. She was ashamed of me. After walking about 200 meters, a budget motel appeared by the roadside. Half of its yellow neon sign was broken. Only one letter still glowed. I pushed the door open. The front desk was staffed by a woman in her 50s. She was playing dance videos on her phone, the volume cranked all the way up. One night, she looked up at me, saw the water dripping from every part of my body, and added, "ID." I handed her my ID. She glanced at it, then glanced back up at me. This time there was something more in her eyes. She had probably recognized the name, Mr. Julian. A standard room is $150. 100 deposit, she said. I scanned the QR code and paid. My phone buzzed again. In a message from Marcus, the $200,000 went through a Chase personal account transfer. The recipient is Adrian Technologies' corporate account opened in Los Angeles. Also, I've already mapped out Adrian Technologies' entire financing structure. Another message followed immediately. Their funding has 3 layers. The outermost layer is a shell company Adrian registered in Los Angeles. The middle layer is an SPV in the Cayman Islands. The bottom layer is a limited partnership in the British Virgin Islands. The investor coming tomorrow will inject funds through the SPV. The first tranche is $2 million as bridge funding for the angel round. What's the investor's name? I replied. Vincent, a partner at Zenith Venture Capital. His reputation in the industry is average. He specializes in these pump and dump projects. Adrian probably promised him high returns. Vincent. I repeated the name silently. He did not know him. He was likely not from any major institution. Real institutions would not touch a project that had not even had its lab data verified. I put my phone down and carried my suitcases upstairs. The room was on the 4th floor. There was no elevator. The stairwell smelled of dampness and stale cigarette smoke. And as I reached the 3rd floor, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was not Marcus. It was an unknown number. The area code was Los Angeles. I answered. A middle-aged man's voice came through, with a brisk, professional tone. May I speak to Mr. Julian of DeepSpace Capital? Yes. The voice on the other end changed immediately, shifting from professional efficiency to careful deference. Mr. Julian, this is Vincent from Zenith Venture Capital. The thing is, I was scheduled to sign an investment agreement with Adrian Technologies tomorrow, but I just received a notice from the Cayman Islands that our associated fund has been frozen. I wanted to ask if there has been some sort of misunderstanding. Adrian had not received the news yet, but his investor already had. I leaned against the wall of the stairwell. The plaster was peeling off in large patches, exposing the concrete underneath. The hallway light was motion-activated and had already gone out. The only light in the entire stairwell was the faint glow of my phone screen. Mr. Vincent, I said, this is not a misunderstanding. The line went quiet. But we have no business dealings with DeepSpace Capital. This fund has no asset crossover with your side whatsoever. Vincent's voice was tightening, as if he was desperately trying to recall what he had done to offend this particular giant. It has nothing to do with the fund, I said. It has to do with the company you are about to sign with tomorrow. Vincent was a smart man. No one survives in the venture capital world for as many years as he had without being smart. He was silent for about 10 seconds. Then he spoke, and his tone was completely different from when the call began. Understood. Mr. Julian, I will not be in San Francisco tomorrow. As for the frozen fund, please handle it as you see fit. You have my full cooperation. Someone will be in touch with you about the fund, I said, and ended the call. The hallway light came on. Not the motion sensor one, in a flash of lightning outside the window, illuminating the entire stairwell in stark white. Went up to the 4th floor, found my room number, swiped the card and opened the door. The room was small. 1 bed, 1 desk, 1 TV. In there was a water stain on the wall shaped like a map. Innie pushed my 2 suitcases into the corner and sat down on the edge of the bed. The blanket felt slightly damp. It did not matter. I put my phone on the nightstand. The screen lit up again. In a message from Elena on WhatsApp. Just a single question mark. In no other words, she had probably received the bank notification that the transfer failed, that her $200,000 had been returned to the account. Innie did not reply. A minute later, she sent a second message. "Julian, did you touch the account?" I still did not reply. Then the phone rang. Elena's name lit up on the screen. I watched it for about 5 seconds before answering. "Julian, what the hell is your problem?" Her voice was full of anger. It was nothing like the woman who had pushed me out the door 2 hours ago. Back then she had been cold, and now she was genuinely panicked. "Did you ask me before you transferred the money?" I said. "It's a joint account. I have every right. You know exactly who you were transferring it to." There was silence on the other end. I could hear her breathing, rapid and unsteady, as if she was trying to piece together words that would not come. Outside the window, the rain began to pick up again, drumming against the air conditioning unit with a dull metallic clatter. "Adrian's project is going to close tomorrow." Elena's voice suddenly went soft, taking on an almost pleading tone. "He just needs this $200,000. Just transfer the money back. Once he signs the deal, I promise I'll pay you back." She said, "Pay you back," as if the money had been hers all along, just temporarily parked with me. I smiled in the darkness. She could not see it. She never needed to see it. "No need to wait for the signing," I said. "His fund is already gone."
"What fund?"
"What are you talking about? Tell Adrian to check for himself the status of his Cayman fund account. Right now." I pulled the phone away from my ear and hung up. Elena's call immediately came through again. She called 3 times in a row. Innie did not answer. The 4th time, no call came. Instead, a flood of messages poured in, over a dozen in a row. Innie scrolled through them. All questions. "What do you mean? What did you do? Julian, have you lost your mind? Do you have any idea how much Adrian has sacrificed for this project?" I scrolled to her last message and typed my reply. "Tell him to come ask me himself." Then I switched my phone to airplane mode. The room was quiet. Only the hum of the air conditioner and the growing roar of the storm outside. Innie took off my soaked clothes, draped them over the back of the chair, and lay down on that damp bed, staring at the water stain on the ceiling. 3 years. I had spent 3 years living like an ordinary person, squeezing onto the BART every morning, coming home every evening to warm up a glass of milk for a woman. She said her stomach was delicate. She needed a warm cup before bed. Innie remembered the temperature, the timing, every detail. I thought that would earn me a "your home" instead of a cold Julian. I thought a human heart was made of flesh and blood. But now I understood. Some hearts are made of stone, and no matter how long you hold them, they never grow warm. I closed my eyes. An image flashed through my mind. Tomorrow, in a conference room in San Francisco, Adrian in his sharp suit standing before a table. Across from him, Vincent's assistant, apologizing with a look of practiced regret. "Mr. Vincent sends his apologies. Something urgent came up." Then the calls, the emails, the freeze notification from the Cayman Islands, filtering down layer by layer. First, he would refuse to believe it. Then he would check the account. Then he would confirm it. And then his face would change. It would turn uglier than my own face had looked last night, drenched in the rain. I rolled over and buried my face in the pillow. Tomorrow was going to be a very long day. The next morning, I was jolted awake by my phone vibrating. After I turned off airplane mode, the messages surged in like a dam had burst. 17 missed calls from Elena. Over 40 messages, sent between 1 in the morning and 4 in the morning. The last one had been sent at exactly 4:09. Just 2 words. "Pick up." I did not reply. Marcus's messages, on the other hand, were concise. Only 2. The first had come at 6 in the morning. "Vincent has formally notified Adrian Technologies that he is withdrawing from this round of investment." The second had come at 7:30. Adrian has moved the launch event. It was supposed to be at a hotel, but he has switched it to a co-working space in the Silicon Valley district. He's probably trying to find backup investors to save face. I sat on the edge of the bed and read through everything. Then I sent Marcus a reply. Pull up Elena's property mortgage records. Already done, Marcus responded instantly. She took out a second mortgage on your marital home last month. The loan amount is $1.8 million through a Wells Fargo channel. The funds were scheduled to hit Adrian Technologies' account this morning as emergency funding for Adrian. $1.8 million. That house was the one we bought when we got married. Inai paid the down payment. Ini paid the monthly mortgage. Elena's name was added later. She had never asked if I agreed, and I had never imagined she would need to. And now she had mortgaged the house, $1.8 million, and it was all going straight into the bottomless pit of Adrian's company. Has the money been released yet? I asked. Not yet. The bank's loan approval process wraps up at 10 this morning. The funds will arrive before 10:30. I checked the time. 8:47. Stop it, I said. Not a single dollar gets through. Understood. Marcus hung up. He did not ask how. After 8 years with me, he knew this was the kind of thing that required no questions. Inai left the motel and grabbed a cab heading to the Silicon Valley district. The rain had stopped along the way. In San Francisco was like that. In a torrential downpour, and then the sun comes out immediately after. The humidity steaming up from the ground was suffocating. The cab driver had the air conditioning on full blast, cold air hitting my face with a strange kind of clarity. Inai arrived at the tech district just past 10 in the morning. The co-working space Adrian had rented was on the 3rd floor. A few cars were parked downstairs. One of them was Elena's white Audi. Inai told the cab to pull over across the street and rolled down the window. The 3rd floor had a full wall of glass. Through it, I could see a crowd of people inside, about a dozen or so. At 10:28, Elena rushed out of the building. She was wearing a business suit today, her hair neatly pinned up. But the look on her face was that of someone being chased. She stood at the entrance making a phone call, pacing back and forth. My phone rang. It was Elena. Inai answered. Ini said nothing. Julian, what did you do? The bank says the loan disbursement has been stopped by a compliance hold. They said a third-party agency requested the freeze. Her voice was frantic, but she was still trying to keep it down. Probably afraid the people upstairs would hear. Did you ask me before you mortgaged the house? I said. She paused on the other end. Then her voice suddenly spiked. It's community property. Ini have the right. Community? I said. When you threw me out, did you think about that word? Elena went silent. A car honked on the street. The noise was loud, drowning out her rapid breathing. She stood on the steps outside the office building, gripping her phone in one hand and the hem of her jacket in the other. Inai recognized that posture. It was the same one she had when she first met me 3 years ago. So nervous she did not know where to put her hands. Just let him go this once. She suddenly softened her voice. This was the second time she had tried this tactic. Consider this money a loan from me, okay? I'll write you an IOU. Those people upstairs, I interrupted her. What are you planning to entertain them with? No money. What are you going to offer them? She lifted her head as if trying to look in my direction, but across the street, behind the reflective glass of the cab window, she could not see me. She stood there, sunlight falling on her face. Even from 30 meters away, I could see her eyes turning red. I don't know, she said, her voice so low it was barely audible. Julian, what do you actually want? I did not answer, because at that moment, chaos erupted behind the glass wall on the 3rd floor. Several people who had been sitting in the conference room stood up. One middle-aged man in a floral shirt slammed his hand on the table. The force sent his chair rolling back into the wall. Adrian was standing in the middle of the room, both hands gesturing in the air, trying to explain something. But the man in the floral shirt was not listening. He grabbed his bag and walked out. One person left, then another, then a third. The people in that conference room scattered like ants fleeing a destroyed nest. Adrian chased after them. stopping one after another, explaining to one after another. No one stopped for him. Elena saw it too. She hung up the phone and ran back inside. I sat in the cab and rolled the window back up. The driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "Sir, are we going or not?" "Not yet. Wait a while." At 10:40, Marcus called. "The money has been stopped. Wells Fargo halted the disbursement on compliance grounds. The reason is that large mortgage-backed loans require both parties' signatures. Elena did a single signature application. It was never compliant to begin with." "Got it. There's one more thing." Marcus paused for a beat. I checked the leasing situation on Adrian's co-working space. They rented the entire third floor for a 6-month term, but they only paid 1 month's rent. The property management said if they fall further behind, utilities will be cut next week. "Got it." I hung up. The third floor had mostly emptied out. Through the glass wall, I could see only Elena, Adrian, and 2 young staff members, probably employees. Adrian was leaning against the conference table, both hands bracing himself, his head hanging low. Elena stood beside him, her mouth moving. Inni could not tell what she was saying. She reached out to touch his shoulder. Adrian shook her hand off violently. Elena stumbled back a step. That posture, it looked like she had been slapped. Then she turned and walked out of the meeting room. She stood alone in the hallway for a long time. Through the glass, I saw her take out her phone, stare at it for a long moment, and in the end she did not make the call. At noon, I told the driver to go. Before leaving, I took one last look at that building. Elena was still standing in the third-floor hallway. The sun stretched her shadow long against the white-tiled wall, like a photograph torn halfway. She was panicking. For the first time in 3 years, I saw her panicking. She had bet everything on Adrian, on his comeback, his project, his promises, but she forgot to ask one question. If Adrian was so reliable, why did he go bankrupt in the first place? Why did he abandon her and run overseas? She never thought about these questions, and so I thought about them for her. And as the cab rounded the street corner, I sent Marcus a message. "That office building. Find out who owns it. I want to buy it." Less than 10 seconds after the message sent, Marcus replied with one word: "Done." The owner of the office building was a company called Horizon Properties, a mid-sized local developer based in San Francisco. The owner was a man named Gerald in his late 60s. He had spent half a lifetime in commercial real estate and held 3 office buildings in the Silicon Valley district. His life was comfortable, if unremarkable. Marcus was even more efficient than I had anticipated. By the next morning, Gerald's secretary had called Marcus to schedule a meeting for 2 in the afternoon at a tea house across from the tech district. When Marcus relayed the message, he added one line. Gerald asked who you are. I told him Julian of DeepSpace Capital. He immediately cleared his entire afternoon. At 2 in the afternoon, when I arrived at the tea house, Gerald was already waiting. He looked older than his photos. His hair was entirely grey. He wore a faded polo shirt. He did not look like a man worth several $billion at all. He stood up personally to pour me tea. The spout of the teapot clinked lightly against the rim of the cup. "Mr. Julian, your assistant Marcus mentioned you are interested in purchasing my Building B office tower." Gerald got straight to the point, but his tone was extremely polite, layered with subtle probing. "The entire building," I said. Gerald set the teapot down and looked at me. He was a man who had spent decades navigating the business world. The way he looked at people was different. He did not ask, "Can you afford it?" He simply assessed what kind of person you were and what you had come to do. Building B has 22 floors. Current occupancy is around 70%, Gerald said, observing my expression as he spoke. Market price based on comparable transactions in the area would be around. "I am not buying at market price," I interrupted. "I will give you a 20% premium. But I have one condition." Gerald's hand froze in midair on its way to pick up his teacup. He looked at me for about 3 seconds, then smiled. It was a very measured smile. "Mr. Julian, please, let me hear it. There's a co-working tenant on the 3rd floor called Adrian Technologies, and I want you to double their rent. The notice goes out today. Gerald's smile receded a little, not completely, just a little. He picked up his teacup, took a sip, and swallowed slowly. The whole process took about 10 seconds. In those 10 seconds, his mind probably ran through 800 different calculations. This Adrian Technologies. Gerald set his cup down. Some bad blood between you and them. Personal matter. Gerald nodded. He did not ask further. He did not need to. In a 20% premium to buy an entire building just to double the rent on one tenant. To any normal person, that was incomprehensible. But Gerald was not a normal person. He was an old fox who had spent half a lifetime in business. He knew there was a kind of person in this world who could not be measured by normal logic. And after 10 seconds of assessment, he concluded that I was exactly that kind of person. Deal, Gerald said. I'll have legal draw up the contract this afternoon. I'll handle the rent notice personally. Send it now, I said. Gerald looked at me once more, then pulled out his phone. Half an hour later, my phone rang. It was not Gerald. It was Elena. I watched the name Elena glow on the screen for 3 seconds before answering, and her voice was much hoarser than the day before, as if she had been yelling for a long time, or perhaps she had been crying, but she was trying hard to make her tone sound normal, even gentle. That kind of gentleness I had only heard from her in the first few days after we got married. Julian, she said, can we meet? What is it? There's a problem with Adrian's office. The property management sent a notice saying the rent is doubling. If we don't cover the difference from last month by tomorrow, they will start eviction proceedings. She paused, as if waiting for my reaction. When I said nothing, she forced herself to continue. I know you might still be angry, but he has really hit a dead end this time. If he loses the office, he loses everything. You're calling me because you want me to help him? I asked, in silence on the other end for 2 seconds. Then Elena said, do you have any connections? You mentioned once that you have a friend in real estate. Could you make a call and ask around? I almost laughed out loud. 3 days ago, she had thrown me out of my own house so her ex-husband could stay there. 3 days later, she was calling to ask me to use my connections to lower her ex-husband's rent. Elena, did you really think I was a man with no bottom line? Where are you? I asked. Silicon Valley District, outside Building B. Stay there. Don't move. I hung up, stood up, said a brief word to Gerald, and walked out of the tea house. Building B was a 5-minute walk from the tea house. From a distance, I could see Elena standing on the steps outside the main entrance. She was still in the same business suit from the day before, but her hair was not as neat now. A few strands had come loose and clung to her cheeks. Adrian was not with her. She was alone, clutching a printed copy of the rent adjustment notice. She was gripping it so tightly the paper had crumpled. When she saw me walking toward her, her eyes lit up. That brief flicker of light was something I had not seen in her eyes for a very, very long time. But I knew it was not because she was happy to see me. It was because she thought my arrival meant hope. Hope to help Adrian. Julian, she said my name. Not cold and clipped, just my name. The last time she had said it like that was over a year ago. Can you help? Elena. I stood in front of her, looking down into her eyes. Do you know who owns this building now? She froze. I do, I said. The contract was signed this afternoon. Elena's expression shifted several times in that one moment. First confusion, then disbelief, then shock, and finally, a complexity I had never seen on her face before. The hand clutching the rent notice began to tremble. Her knuckles went white.
You bought the entire building?
Her voice was so quiet, as if afraid the wind would blow it away. Yes, just to raise his rent. Yes. Elena stepped back half a pace. Her high heel caught the edge of the step. She wobbled and nearly lost her balance. She grabbed the handrail, her whole body like a tree that had been bent by the wind, and then released. She was still standing, but something inside her was no longer there. You're insane, she said. I'm not insane, I said. I'm just letting him taste what it feels like to have no home to go back to. That sentence hit her like a knife, precisely into her chest. I saw it. Her eyes reddened instantly. Her lips moved, wanting to say something, but nothing came out. She knew exactly what I was referring to. That stormy night 3 days ago. 3 suitcases. An old duffel bag that was not even fully zipped, and the soft click of her closing the door behind me. Julian, she suddenly reached out and grabbed my sleeve. Her fingers were ice cold, but her grip was fierce, as if she was clutching the last lifeline she had. Let me apologize for him, okay? Take it out on me. Just stop tormenting him. He's really at the end. Last night, he sat alone in the conference room the whole night. He didn't say a single word. She was begging for Adrian. I was the one who had been thrown out of my own home. I was the one whose money from our joint account had been used to fund her ex-husband. I was the one whose marital home had been mortgaged without my knowledge. But now, she was standing at the entrance of my building, holding my sleeve, begging me to let her ex-husband off the hook. I looked down at her hand. On that slender finger was our wedding ring. She had probably forgotten to take it off, or she had forgotten she was still wearing it. When you mortgaged the house for him, I said. My voice was flat. So flat, it surprised even me. Did you think about me? Elena's hand let go. Not because she chose to, because her strength ran out, and her fingers slipped from my sleeve one by one until only the ring finger still held on. And then that one slipped away too. She stood before me with her head bowed, her shoulders trembling. A tear dropped onto the tiled floor beneath her feet, blooming into a small, dark stain. Innie said nothing more. Innie turned and walked through the doors of Building B. The young woman at the front desk saw me enter and stood up, saying, "Good afternoon, Mr. Julian," her voice timid. Gerald had probably informed the entire property management team. The new owner was Mr. Julian of DeepSpace Capital. Everyone was to address him as Mr. Julian. Before the elevator doors closed, I glanced back through the entrance. Elena was still standing on the steps. The sunlight had shrunk her shadow into a tiny ball, huddled against the white tile floor. My phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. Adrian just contacted 3 small VC firms. All 3 rejected him. He's in his office smashing things. Property management is asking if we should call the police. No, I replied. Let him smash. If he breaks anything, he pays market price. The elevator reached the top floor. When the doors opened, the entire opposite wall was a floor-to-ceiling window facing the Bay Area coastline. The sea sparkled under the sun, like someone had scattered a handful of crushed diamonds across the water. Gerald had told me the entire top floor was my personal office space. He asked how I wanted it renovated. I said I did not want it renovated. Leave an empty room. He asked why. I said, emptiness itself is a kind of decoration. He did not understand. Elena probably did not understand either. Adrian understood even less. It did not matter. They would understand eventually. Adrian smashing things in his office was something Marcus updated me on every half hour. First, he smashed a monitor in a 27-inch Dell curved screen that Elena had bought him last year. Then the glass tea table in the lounge area. One kick sent it over, shards of glass spraying across the floor. Finally, the whiteboard on the wall, the one with his project's financing roadmap drawn all over it. He took a marker and drew a giant X across the whole thing. The X was so deep the whiteboard cracked. Marcus sent a clip from the surveillance footage to my phone. In the footage, Adrian was alone in the wrecked office. His tie was crooked. His sleeves were rolled up to his elbows. His entire body looked like a screw that had been over-torqued, all its threads stripped. He was shouting something at the empty air. There was no audio on the surveillance recording, but I could read his lips perfectly. He was cursing Elena. His exact words were, "This is all that stupid woman's fault." I sat in that empty office on the top floor of Building B and watched the surveillance footage 3 times. The afternoon sun poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, spreading a vast golden blanket across the floor. I sat in the light, feeling not a ripple of emotion. Some people are human in good times and monsters in bad times. Adrian was that kind of person. He had never once disappointed me. At 4 in the afternoon, Marcus sent another message. He's moved the last of Adrian Technologies' money. How much? $680,000. It was the company's reserve fund, meant to cover employee salaries and next month's server costs. He just transferred it from the corporate account to his personal account.
When?
350. The transfer memo says travel expenses. Travel expenses. Inai leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling, a faint smile on my face. $680,000 for travel expenses. Was Adrian planning to travel to Mars? Where is he now? I asked, still in his office. But he's booked a 9p in-flight to Cancun tonight. Delta Airlines. Marcus's voice was steady, like he was reading a weather report. Mr. Julian, should we intercept him? I stood up and walked to the window. Down below, the roads of the tech district were bleached white by the afternoon sun. Traffic was sparse. In a few palm trees stood motionless. The entrance to the underground parking garage at Building B was directly opposite the main doors. In its shutter gate was half open like a mouth waiting to be fed. Don't intercept the flight, I said. Arrange a few people. Have them wait in the underground garage. He'll come. Understood. Just past 5, Elena called again. This time her voice was not hoarse. It was shattered. Like a glass slipping from a hand and hitting the tile floor. Every word had a crack running through it. Julian, Adrian is missing. His phone is off. His office door is locked. The lights are still on inside, but he's not there. She choked up midway through, then forced whatever was lodged in her throat back down. Do you know where he is? No, I said. It was the truth. Innie did not know where he was right now, but I knew where he was going. He can't just leave like this, Elena said. Her voice began to tremble. There are still over a dozen employees waiting for their paychecks. The vendor payments are 2 months overdue. If he's gone, all these people will have... Are you going to carry it for him? I cut her off, in silence on the other end. In a car honked on the street. The sound came through the phone speaker, which meant she was still out running around. Innie could picture her, standing at some intersection, phone in hand, forehead covered in sweat, her makeup half ruined, eyeliner smudged by sweat into 2 grey streaks down her face. Elena, I said. The 1.8 million you mortgaged the house for. If I had not stopped it, it would be in his account right now. Add this 680,000. Do you think he's going on a business trip or is he running? She did not speak. But she did not hang up either. Through the phone, I could hear her breathing in and out, faster and faster. Like someone standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down and realizing there was no bottom at all. Go find him, I said. Underground parking garage. If you go now, you might still catch him. Underground garage? How do you know? I hung up. At 5:30, I went downstairs. Innie exited through the back door of Building B's lobby and circled around to the entrance of the underground parking garage. The garage was enormous. The lighting was a dim, sickly yellow. The concrete pillars were marked with fluorescent B1 signs. The air smelled of motor oil and damp concrete. My car was parked directly opposite the elevator entrance, in a black Maybach that Marcus had shipped over from Los Angeles last month. Innie got in, rolled down the window, turned off the headlights, and melted into the deep darkness of the garage. At 5:50, the elevator dinged. Adrian stepped out. He had changed clothes, in a dark jacket and a black baseball cap. In his hand was a small briefcase, not a suitcase. The kind of compact business case that could comfortably hold a few $100,000 in cash. He walked fast, head down, cap pulled low. He moved like a stray cat slinking along the base of a wall. He reached a grey BMW and pressed his key fob. The headlights flashed twice, then 4 blinding beams of light hit him simultaneously. 2 black SUVs emerged from opposite directions, their high beams set to maximum, pinning Adrian and his car in the center of the light. He instinctively raised a hand to block the glare. The briefcase slipped from his grip and hit the ground with a slap. The latch broke open. Bundles of $100 bills slid out and scattered across the concrete. 4 men in black suits got out of the SUVs. They did not block him. They did not touch him. They simply formed a semicircle and stood there, in no words, in no approaching, just standing. In there are things more terrifying than violence, and one of those things is the realization that the other side is in no hurry to use it. Adrian stood in place, turning in a circle, registering the 4 figures in all directions. His face, under the harsh, high beams, was as white as a sheet of paper. He tried to step back, but his leg caught on the briefcase. He stumbled, nearly falling. The BMW's headlights were still flashing in that steady rhythm. That blinking pattern, paired with the expression on his face, looked like a silent comedy film. Who are you? His voice pitched high, bouncing off the garage walls. No one answered him. I pushed my car door open and stepped out of the darkness. My leather soles made soft tapping sounds against the concrete. With every step I took forward, Adrian took a step back until his back hit the hood of the BMW. There was nowhere left to go. He recognized me. In beneath the brim of his baseball cap, his eyes first widened, then his pupils contracted, his lips parted, then closed, parted again. He wanted to say something, but it was as if a wad of cotton had been stuffed down his throat. Not a single word could get out. I stopped in front of him. The 4 men in black suits simultaneously stepped back, opening up the space. The garage was eerily quiet. Only the hum of the ventilation ducts overhead and the distant dripping sound of water from some unseen car. I looked down at the money scattered on the ground. $100 bills, 10,000 per bundle. About a dozen or so bundles scattered. 680,000, every dollar accounted for. Traveling? I said. Adrian's Adam's apple bobbed. His lips quivered for a moment before he forced out a sentence. Julian, let me explain.
Explain what?
Explain how you used my wife's money to buy yourself a plane ticket to run? I'm not running. He suddenly shouted, his voice echoing through the garage in layered waves. I'm going to Cancun to meet a new investor. There's a new energy fund there. I have a meeting scheduled. Cancun. 9 p. One-way ticket. I looked into his eyes. The light in his eyes was dying bit by bit. Adrian, you didn't even buy a return ticket. He went silent. Beneath the cap, his face twisted, not with guilt, with the anger and fear of someone who had been caught and exposed. I had seen this expression many times before, at business negotiation tables. In the final moments of acquisitions, the faces of men backed into a corner all looked exactly like this. At that moment, the rapid clatter of high heels echoed from the garage entrance. Click, 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 click. Slowing, then quickening. Distant, then near. Elena came running in. Her hair had completely come undone. Half the makeup on her face was ruined. Her high heel caught on the concrete and twisted. Her ankle gave way. She did not even pause. She just kept running, limping. When she got close, she saw the money on the ground. She saw the briefcase. She saw the 4 men in black suits. And finally, she saw Adrian and me standing face to face. She stopped. Her chest heaved violently. The sweat on her forehead plastered loose strands of hair to her face. She looked like someone who had just been pulled out of the water. Adrian. She called his name. Her voice still carried the last trace of hope. Didn't you say you were going on a business trip? Adrian did not look at her. He turned his head away, staring at the concrete pillar beside him, his lips pressed into a thin line. Elena walked over. She crouched down and began picking up the scattered money bundle by bundle, placing them back into the briefcase. Her hands were shaking. They shook every time she picked up a bundle. One of the bundles had scattered. She chased the bills one by one, crawling 3 or 4 steps before she got them all. She pressed the broken briefcase shut as best she could, holding it against her chest, and stood up. She turned to face me. Her eyes were bloodshot, as if they were about to bleed. But there were no tears. She had probably run out of tears over the past few days. "Julian," she said. Her voice was eerily calm. "Let him go." I looked into her eyes. She was begging for a man who had been about to abandon her and run. She knew he was going to run, and she still picked up his money for him. She still begged for him. This woman was not stupid. She had simply placed all her bets on one person, and now that she was losing, she was too terrified to admit it. Inni could not make her admit it, but someone could. "Letting him go is fine," I said. "But first, you need to see something." Elena stared at me blankly. The briefcase in her arms was clutched even tighter, as if she were holding onto a piece of driftwood. "What?" she asked. Inai took out my phone, opened a chat history, and tapped on a photo. Ini turned the screen toward her. The photo was of a man and a woman. The man was wearing board shorts and a floral shirt, lying on a beach lounger, grinning like a sunflower. The woman wore a spaghetti-strap floral dress. She leaned against his shoulder, holding a coconut drink in one hand. Her lips were pressed to his ear. The intimacy was unmistakable. The man was Adrian. The woman was young, in mid-20s at most. Long hair, in a sharp chin, big eyes, in a smile that curved upward, the kind men tend to like, and her name was Chloe. Elena stared at the screen for about 5 seconds. The briefcase slowly slid from her arms, hitting the ground. Money spilled out again. This time she did not pick it up. "That's..." Her lips moved, but no sound came out. "Chloe," I said. "The woman Adrian has been keeping on the side for 3 years. You never met her. He was keeping her even before he went bankrupt. When he was broke, she was the one supporting him. And before he came back to find you, he took a trip to Maui with her." I swiped the screen. Second photo, in a selfie of Adrian and Chloe at the airport, their faces pressed together. In the background was the departure gate screen, with the word Maui clearly visible. The timestamp showed December of last year, in a month before Adrian came back to the country. Ini swiped again. In a screenshot of Chloe's Instagram story, the caption read, "Waited 3 years for you, finally coming home." Below it was a picture of 2 hands intertwined, geotagged at SFO. The timestamp was the exact day Adrian had returned. Elena looked at every single like under that post. In there were comments from mutual friends. In one said, "Congrats, finally reunited." She had no idea. She knew nothing. The day Adrian returned, Elena told me she had to go to the airport to pick up an old friend. Ini was in the kitchen warming milk. She said it with a light, easy tone, as if she really was just going to pick up an old friend. She came back with red eyes, saying the old friend had changed a lot, that the old friend had been through a hard time these past years. That old friend was Adrian. "These past 3 years," I said, scrolling through the screen, page after page for her to see. "When he was borrowing money from you, his girlfriend was posting vacation photos from Aspen. When he told you he was working late on the project, he was with his girlfriend in a 5-star resort in Maui. And the day before you were about to send him that $1.8 million mortgage loan, he had just transferred his girlfriend $88,000 for her birthday." Elena stopped looking at my phone. She turned around to face Adrian, who was still leaning against the hood of the BMW. Adrian lifted his eyes from under his cap and glanced at her, then quickly dropped them again. In his face, exposed under the harsh light, was an open book. Not guilt. It was the shame of being exposed, twisted into anger. When a person's mask is ripped off, the most primal reaction is rage. "You investigated me?" Adrian did not look at Elena. He stared at me as if he had finally found an angle to deflect. "Julian, you son of a bitch, you investigated me?" I did not speak. "Yeah, Chloe. 3 years. In so what?" Adrian suddenly straightened up. His baseball cap fell to the ground. He did not pick it up. He pointed a finger at Elena and shouted, "When I was with her, what were you doing? You were marrying him. You got married too. Neither of us is clean here. Don't act like a victim." Those words hit Elena like a pot of boiling oil thrown in her face. She stumbled back 2 steps. Her ankle twisted again. This time she could not hold herself up. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed onto the concrete floor. The gravel bit into her knees, but she did not react. She just knelt there, looking at Adrian. Her mouth opened, then closed, like a fish washed up on shore. "Adrian," she said. Her voice scraped out of her throat, so hoarse it was barely recognizable. "You said once the project got off the ground, you would marry me. Who wants to marry you?" Adrian turned his face away. His voice was full of irritation. "You were just my investor. We had a business relationship. You read too much into it." A business relationship? 3 words. He had packaged all of Elena's sacrifices over the years, all her betrayals, all her desperate bets into one cold, clinical phrase. She had transferred him who knows how many $200,000 payments. She had mortgaged her marital home for him. She had thrown her own husband out of the house for him, and in the end she was just an investor. She had read too much into it. Elena knelt on the ground, motionless. The harsh light cast her shadow long and dark across the concrete floor. The shadow's shoulders were shaking, but the person inside the shadow made no sound. I walked over, put my phone away, and looked down at her. She lifted her head to look at me. Her eyes were completely bloodshot, but the look inside them was empty. This was the look of someone who had been completely hollowed out, in no anger, in no sadness, not even shock. Just the ruins of a bombing raid, still smoking. "Do you see it now?" I asked her. She nodded, in a tiny movement, so small you would miss it if you were not watching closely. "Is this man human or is he a ghost?" She did not answer me, and instead she pushed herself up from the concrete. It took her 3 tries to stand. Then she bent down and picked up the briefcase, gathering the scattered money bundle by bundle again. After she finished, she placed the briefcase on the hood of the BMW. She turned around and limped toward the garage exit. 3 steps later, she stopped. She looked back at Adrian. That look, I will never forget it. It was not hatred. It was not resentment. It was a complete and total clearing, like formatting a hard drive. Clean, nothing left. "Do you want Chloe's number?" I said from behind her. She did not turn around. She shook her head and kept walking. Elena, just listen to me," Adrian shouted after her. Elena did not stop. Her high heels hit the concrete slope of the exit ramp. Every step landed hard, as if she were grinding something filthy from the soles of her shoes. I watched her until she was gone. Then I turned back to Adrian. The 4 men in black suits were still in position. Without my order, they were 4 pillars nailed to the ground. Adrian looked at me, his lips pale. "What do you actually want?" I walked up to him, picked his baseball cap up off the ground, dusted it off, and placed it back on his head. He flinched, jerking back. The back of his head hit the BMW's side mirror. He winced. "Your mess. Elena begged me for you," I said. "She mortgaged her house for you. She drained our joint account for you. She threw me out of my own home for you. These accounts, I am not settling them on you today." A flicker of hope crossed Adrian's eyes. "But these accounts," I stepped forward. He leaned back until half his body was pressed against the hood. "I will settle them with her, down to the last cent. And as for you, what you owe her, she does not want it back. I will not ask for it either. But what you owe me, every day you owe, you pay a day's worth of interest. I don't owe you." That fund, I cut him off. "Is it yours or is it Vincent's?" Adrian's face changed color. "Vincent." Chloe. Put those 2 names together, and anyone with half a brain could figure it out. Zenith Venture Capital, the Vincent family, one fronting the projects, one circling the perimeter. It was nothing more than a left-hand, right-hand scheme. Adrian had never been an entrepreneur. He was a chess piece the Vincent family had planted next to Elena. The goal was to siphon DeepSpace Capital's resources through her. What Vincent had not anticipated was that Elena knew nothing about DeepSpace Capital, and that I was not some soft target to be pushed around. I had not said any of this in front of Elena. Not out of softness. It was simply not yet time. "You are not going to Cancun," I said. "Vincent is already drowning in his own mess. All 3 of Zenith Venture Capital's funds have been frozen. All 6 properties under Chloe's name will go to auction tomorrow morning." Adrian's face went from white to grey, from grey to a sickly iron green. His hands braced against the hood of the car. His knuckles were bone white from the force of his grip. "There is a flight to Belize City in 4 hours, also 9 p. I said, turning and walking toward the elevator. My leather soles tapped an unhurried rhythm against the concrete. "I have already bought your ticket. Someone will meet you when you land. In there is a new energy project in Belize City. You will spend 3 years there doing market development. You are not to set foot back in the country for 3 years. The 4 men in black suits stepped forward simultaneously, closing the circle around Adrian. "You can refuse," I said without looking back. "But the San Francisco Police Department is already on their way." Embezzlement, $680,000. That is enough for a very long time. The elevator doors opened. Inni stepped inside and turned around. In the last second before the doors closed, I saw Adrian slide down the side of the BMW, slumping onto the ground. His baseball cap had fallen off again. This time no one picked it up. His briefcase was still open. The money was scattered everywhere. He did not pick up a single bill. The elevator rose. My phone buzzed. In a message from Elena. 5 words. The divorce papers. Tomorrow. Unsigned. I stared at the screen for a long time. Inni typed 1 word and sent it. Okay. I stared at those 6 words for a long time. The screen dimmed, then lit up again. Inni sat in that empty office on the top floor, the nightscape of San Francisco spreading out beyond the window. The city lights were thick as ink spilled across the sky. 6 words. She sent 6 words. In no exclamation, in no question mark, clean, like a knife hitting a cutting board. 1 stroke down, not even a crumb left behind. Inni called Marcus. Change the locks on the villa. When? Now. Marcus was silent for 1 second. He had been with me for 8 years and never asked why. But in that 1 second of silence, there was a question he did not ask out loud. Julian, are you really going to take it this far? He did not ask it. After 1 second, he said, all right, Inni will handle it personally. Leave 1 key under the doormat. Take all the others. Understood. I hung up and turned my chair toward the floor-to-ceiling window. The night view from the Silicon Valley district was stunning, in a dense blanket of lights, stretched all the way to the coastline, like someone had scattered a pouch of crushed diamonds over black velvet. 3 years ago, when Elena and I first got married, the apartment we rented had a tiny glimpse of the bay. Just a tiny sliver, in a small blue triangle squeezed into the corner of the kitchen window. Elena said it was fine. She said someday we would live in a better house and see a bigger sea. And we did. We moved into the most expensive villa community in Pacific Heights. From the 2nd floor balcony, you could see an entire wall of the bay. But Elena probably never really looked at that sea. Her eyes had always been fixed elsewhere, on a man who should have stayed buried in the ground long ago. And at 8 the next morning, I was woken by noise downstairs. Not noise from the villa. It was a call from Marcus. He said the locks on the villa had been changed in a dual system, fingerprint and keypad. The code was my usual 6 digits. He also mentioned that when he was changing the locks last night, the neighbor next door had come out to look. They asked if we were moving. Marcus said no, just changing the locks. The neighbor retreated back inside. Has Elena come back yet? I asked. No, but I have someone waiting at the community gate. Inni will know the moment she arrives. No need to wait, I said. She will go today. The divorce papers are still in the villa. Elena had a habit. She kept all important documents in the bottom drawer of the nightstand in the master bedroom. In marriage certificate, property deed, prenuptial agreement, in divorce papers. She had probably prepared them a long time ago and just never taken them out. Inni did not know when she had prepared them, and I did not want to know. Some things, if you look too closely, do no one any good. At 10 in the morning, I arranged for the Pagani to be transported from Los Angeles. When Marcus heard this arrangement, he broke character and asked an extra question. Huayra or Imola? Imola, the one of one. Understood. When Marcus said that word, I heard him inhale slightly. Pagani Imola. 1 of 1 worldwide. The sticker price was north of 8 figures. Inni had bought it 3 years ago. After buying it, I just left it in a garage in Beverly Hills to gather dust. It had never even been registered, and there was no special reason for buying it. Inni was just in a bad mood that day and felt like spending money. Later, Elena once flipped through a car magazine and saw a photo of this model. She casually said, "That's a beautiful car." I almost blurted out that I owned one, but I did not. And if I had told her then, would she have treated me better? Probably not. She would have just thought I was lying. And at 2:40 in the afternoon, Marcus sent a message. Elena has entered the villa community. She came by taxi. Has she realized the locks have been changed? Not yet. She just got out of the car. She is standing outside. I did not reply. Inni put my phone on the desk, stood up and walked to the window. The bay was calmer today than last night. Sunlight glittered on the water. It was almost too beautiful to be real. At 2:45, my phone rang again. Not Marcus. It was Elena. I answered, in silence on the other end for about 3 seconds. Then Elena's voice came through, very low, very quiet, like someone had their hand around her throat. The locks on the villa have been changed.
Yes.
I cannot get in. Yes. Silence again. She took a deep breath. I heard it clearly. The inhale had a distinct tremor. The exhale carried a faint nasal sound. She had been crying. My things are still inside, she said. The divorce papers. My documents. My clothes. Marcus is there. I cut her off. Wait a moment. He will let you in. Marcus? A trace of confusion flickered through Elena's voice. And of course she knew who Marcus was. My company assistant. With me for 8 years. She had seen him many times. Every time, she just nodded faintly and never even offered him a glass of water.
Yes.
He drove the Pagani over. He should be arriving soon. Silence on the other end. Not the silence of hesitation, the silence of someone who had been struck by something and had no idea what to say. Then Elena said, very quietly, "Pagani?" I did not answer. I hung up. Later, Marcus described the scene to me in detail. He described it meticulously, like a business negotiation briefing. He said that when he pulled up to the villa entrance in the Pagani Imola, Elena was standing on the steps, one hand gripping her phone, the other hand clutching a set of keys that no longer worked. She heard the engine and turned her head. When she saw the car, her entire body went rigid. The Pagani Imola was matted black. In its front end was so low it looked like a beast of prey pressed flat against the ground. The lines along its flanks were so sharp they could cut your gaze. The doors opened upward, butterfly style. When they lifted, the whole car looked like a giant black butterfly unfurling its wings. Marcus stepped out of the driver's seat. He was wearing a bespoke navy suit. His leather shoes were polished to a mirror shine. His hair was impeccably combed. Elena had known him for 3 years and had never seen him dressed like this. The Marcus she had seen before was always in a grey jacket and jeans, standing behind the reception desk at the office, nodding at her. She probably did not even remember his face clearly. Mrs. Elena, Marcus walked up to her and inclined his head slightly. "Mr. Julian sent me to help you with the door." Elena's mouth opened. It took several seconds for the sound to come out. "This car, is it yours?" "No," Marcus said. "It is Mr. Julian's. I'm just driving it over for him." Marcus told me that when Elena heard this, she stepped back. Her high heel missed the edge of a step. She wobbled and had to grab the door frame to steady herself. Her eyes darted back and forth between the Pagani and Marcus several times, as if trying to confirm she was not seeing things. Then she asked, "What exactly does he do?" Marcus did not answer directly. He pulled the new key from his pocket, inserted it into the lock, and turned it twice. The door opened with a click. He pulled the key out and placed it in Elena's palm. He said, "Mrs. Elena, Mr. Julian asked me to let you know you may stay as long as you like. But when you leave, please place the key under the doormat." Elena looked down at the key in her palm. She was silent for a very long time. Then she pushed the door open and walked inside. 2 steps later, she stopped and turned around to look at Marcus one more time. "When did he buy this villa?" 3 years ago. "Cash? Cash." Elena's chin trembled faintly. Then she closed the door. Marcus said he stood outside and did not leave immediately, because through the door he could hear Elena crying inside. It was not a loud, wailing cry. It was the kind of very soft, suppressed sound someone makes when they bury their face in a pillow, terrified of being heard. She had probably seen the Pagani's key in the bedroom. That key had always been in the nightstand drawer, right next to her marriage certificate. In 3 years, she had never once opened that drawer. If she had, even just once, she would have known I was never some ordinary office worker making a 5-figure salary. But she never did. She did not care what I had. She only cared about what Adrian did not have. At 3:30, Marcus drove the Pagani away. Before leaving on my orders, he also drove away the old Honda Civic parked in front of the villa. That old Civic I had driven for 3 years. The one Elena thought was an embarrassment. The one she told me to trade in. He drove it to the underground garage in the Silicon Valley district and parked it next to the Maybach. One $30,000, $300,000. 2 parking spaces apart. 2 different worlds. At 7 in the evening, Elena sent me another message. The papers are signed. They are on the coffee table in the living room. I packed your things. They are in a suitcase in the guest bedroom. Okay, Julian, who exactly are you? I stared at that message for 3 minutes. I typed 7 words and deleted them. In the end, I sent only a peer. She did not need to know the answer. Or rather, the answer had always been there. She had just never thought to look. The next day, I received the signed divorce papers. White paper, black ink. Elena's signature sat in the bottom right corner. The pen strokes were heavy. You could feel the indentations on the back of the paper. In the section for property division, she had filled in nothing. She had written only one line. No community property to divide. She did not ask for the $1.8 million mortgage. She did not ask for the savings from 3 years of marriage. She did not even mention the villa's title. She put the papers down and left. She placed the key under the doormat. The surveillance footage at the community gate captured her leaving, alone, pulling a small 20-inch suitcase. She hailed a taxi heading toward the Silicon Valley district. I had someone look into it. She had rented an apartment next to the tech district. 450 square feet, $2,000 a month. That was the same apartment complex where Adrian's Chloe had lived before she moved out. Elena did not know that. She did not know any of it. 3 days after the divorce papers were signed, Elena was served with a lawsuit. Marcus sent me the news at 6 in the morning. I was standing by the window of my hotel suite, drinking coffee. My phone buzzed. I opened it. 3 pictures. One was a court summons. One was a complaint. The third was a photo of Elena standing at the door of her rental apartment, the summons in her hand. The photo was taken by someone Marcus had assigned. Elena was in her pajamas, and her hair was unbrushed. The expression on her face was that of someone who had just been stabbed in the back. The complaint was clear. Plaintiff Adrian, defendant Elena. Cause of action, business fraud. Adrian claimed that Elena had made false statements during the financing process of Adrian Technologies, causing the company to suffer losses totaling $23 million. He was seeking joint and several liability from Elena. $23 million. I set my coffee cup down and read the complaint from beginning to end. Twice, Adrian had hired a lawyer. The complaint was a mess of nonsense, but the core logic was clear. Shift the entire blame for the failed financing of Adrian Technologies onto Elena. Claim that Elena fabricated investment capabilities, misused the name of DeepSpace Capital, and induced the plaintiff to sign financing agreements. He had also submitted 3 pieces of evidence. One was a WeChat chat history between him and Elena, in which Elena had said, "I'll figure out the money." The second was an investment term sheet with Elena's signature, which indeed bore Adrian Technologies' company's seal. The third was the most absurd. It was a photocopy of Elena's and my marriage certificate, submitted to prove that Elena was the spouse of a DeepSpace Capital affiliate, and that the financing commitments she made on behalf of DeepSpace Capital constituted apparent authority. I stared at the words DeepSpace Capital for a long time. Adrian knew who I was now. He must have found out from Vincent, after Vincent had 3 of his funds frozen. He would have had no choice but to look into my background. After Adrian got hold of my real identity, instead of reflecting on who he had offended, he tried to use a lawsuit to make a comeback, sue Elena, force me to step in, and then bite a chunk out of me. This man was not just bad, he was stupid. Bad and stupid. Mr. Julian, Marcus's voice was steady, but I could tell he was angry. This complaint is a complete inversion of the facts. Elena never represented DeepSpace Capital in any capacity. The line, "I'll figure out the money" in the chat log proves absolutely nothing, and that marriage certificate is illegally obtained private material. Why are you angry? I cut him off. I just think, assemble the legal team, I said, the entire Asia-Pacific division. They are to be in San Francisco by this afternoon. Marcus paused for one beat, then his tone changed. From anger to calm, from calm to a kind of solemn deference. All members of the Asia-Pacific legal team, including partners from the Tokyo, Singapore, Hong Kong and Shanghai offices, all of them,
Understood.
47 people in the Asia-Pacific legal team, 17 partners, 30 senior associates. The last time this team had been assembled in full was 2 years ago to handle the antitrust review of DeepSpace Capital's acquisition of a Japanese semiconductor conglomerate's chip division. The deal was worth 28 billion Hong Kong dollars. Now I was calling all of them to San Francisco to fight a $23 million commercial dispute. It sounded like using a nuclear bomb to kill a mosquito. But I wanted to use a nuclear bomb to kill a mosquito, not to win, to make Elena see clearly who was stabbing her in the back and who was holding up a shield in front of her. By 4 in the afternoon, all 47 had arrived. The ballroom at the Ritz-Carlton in San Francisco was converted into a war room. 2 walls were covered with electronic screens. The 4 office partners sat in a row. Senior associates sat in the back rows. Each person had a laptop in front of them and a cup of coffee that had not been touched. Marcus projected the case onto the largest screen. In less than 10 minutes, he had deconstructed Adrian's entire complaint. Takeshi from the Tokyo office was the first to speak. He spoke in Japanese, and the simultaneous interpreter beside him translated, "None of the plaintiff's 3 pieces of evidence possess complete evidentiary validity. The chat log is a unilateral excerpt lacking full context. The investment term sheet lacks third-party witness verification. The marriage certificate is illegally obtained private material. Our side can move to have it excluded." His words were fast. Every syllable landed with the clean precision of diced tofu. Catherine, the partner from Singapore, took over. She spoke directly in English. Beyond that, the plaintiff uses the concept of apparent authority in the complaint. But the establishment of apparent authority requires some action by the principal, that is, DeepSpace Capital, that caused a third party to form reasonable reliance. DeepSpace Capital has never had any business contact with Adrian Technologies. Our side can provide complete business records to prove this to the court. Lawrence, a barrister from the Hong Kong office, adjusted his glasses and added one more point. Counterclaim. The plaintiff obtained the defendant's private materials through illegal means and submitted them as evidence to the court. This constitutes a severe violation of privacy rights. Our side can file a counterclaim on this basis and simultaneously apply to have the plaintiff's attorney added to the court's professional conduct review list. I sat at the head of the long table, listening to them speak one after another. Each speech was a knife, precisely aimed at the gaping holes in Adrian's laughable complaint. After everyone had spoken, I stood up. I said, "I want to win this case, but I also want Elena to be involved every step of the way, and her lawyer, chosen from among you." Everyone paused. In an elite Asia-Pacific legal team, fighting a case for a penniless woman that was never going to be lost in the first place. In any lawyer's career, this would be considered absurd. But no one objected. Lawrence was the first to speak. He said, "I will take the lead in court." At 6 in the evening, I called Elena. She answered quickly. Her voice was exhausted, as if she had not slept well for days. In there was the sound of a car horn in the background. She was probably on the road somewhere, heading nowhere in particular. "You received the summons?" I asked. Elena was silent for a moment. "How do you know?" "Adrian is suing you." "I know." Her voice was flat, too flat for someone who had just been sued for $23 million. "I've been looking for a lawyer. Legal aid. I'm meeting one tomorrow." "No need. What do you mean?" "I've arranged lawyers for you," I said. "The Ritz-Carlton ballroom. Come now. 47 of them. Choose." Silence on the other end. In a very, very long silence. In so long I thought she had hung up. Then she spoke. Her voice carried a tremble that was hard to describe. Not fear, not gratitude. It was more like someone standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down and realizing the abyss was not an abyss at all, but an enormous net. "Julian, who exactly are you?" The second time she had asked this question. "Come, and you'll find out." When Elena arrived, it was 7:30 in the evening. She pushed open the ballroom doors. When she saw the room full of suited lawyers and the walls covered in electronic screens, she stood in the doorway, completely frozen, for a full 5 seconds. 47 people stood up simultaneously and turned toward her. The sight made Elena flinch backward a step. Lawrence stepped forward, inclined his head slightly, and handed her a business card. "Good evening, Ms. Elena. I am Lawrence, your lead counsel in this case, barrister Hong Kong, in-ranked #1 in Asia-Pacific commercial litigation. The 3 rows seated before you constitute your complete legal team for this matter, 46 people in total. We are here to fight this case for you." Elena took the business card. She looked down at it for a long time. Then she lifted her head. Her gaze moved past everyone else in the room and found me standing in the corner. Her lips moved. No sound came out, but I could read what she said. "Why?" I did not answer. But I had my answer. She needed to see it with her own eyes. The man who had dragged her to court and demanded $23 million was the ex-husband she had poured her heart and soul into supporting for 3 years. And the 47 strangers who showed up to protect her were sent by me. Who was human and who was a ghost? It was time she saw the difference clearly. Elena stood in that ballroom for a full 15 minutes before she spoke. She did not pick a lawyer. She did not ask about strategy. She did not even mention the complaint again. She just stood there in front of those 47 suits, turned her head to me and spoke. Her voice was very soft. It cut through the silence of the entire ballroom. "Julian, let us talk." Lawrence glanced at me. I nodded. He made a gesture, and the 47 people filed out. Their leather soles made almost no sound on the carpet. The last person closed the door behind them. Only Elena and I were left in the ballroom, separated by 20 empty chairs and 1 electronic screen that was still glowing. "I signed the divorce papers," Elena said. She pulled the document out of her bag and placed it on the table. The paper was slightly crumpled, and the edges were curling up. "But I have been thinking on the way here. There are some things I need to ask you." "Ask." "I want my share of the community property," she said, these 6 words staring straight at me. Not with greed, not with calculation. It was a kind of stubbornness I had never seen in her eyes before. On the divorce papers, she had originally written no community property to divide. Now she was taking it back. A woman who had poured her entire fortune into her ex-husband was now here, talking to me about property division. I was not angry. I just found it interesting. "How much do you want?" I asked. "What I am entitled to."
Half.
I looked at her for 3 seconds. She was not wearing makeup today. The skin under her eyes was grey-blue from lack of sleep. Her lips were dry and chapped. I recognized the jacket she was wearing. We had bought it at Union Square 3 years ago. $700 on sale. She had not replaced it in 3 years. But she had once bought Adrian a cashmere overcoat that cost over $20,000. "All right," I said. "Let me show you something." I picked up the remote and pressed a button. The electronic screen lit up. It was not case analysis. It was not an evidence list. It was an Excel spreadsheet, dense with rows of numbers. Every row had a date, an amount, a recipient, a transfer channel, and a note in the far right column. Elena looked up at the screen. At first, her expression was one of confusion. Then her eyes began to move from the top left corner, downward, row by row. By the 3rd row, her face changed. By the 10th row, the hand gripping the divorce papers had tightened. The paper made a faint crumpling sound. "This is," her voice caught halfway, "every transfer you have made to Adrian over the years," I said, leaning against the table. The remote turned idly in my hand. "Every single one." Elena said nothing. Her eyes were nailed to the screen, the white numbers reflected in her pupils jumping line by line. The first transfer, November 7th, 3 years ago, $168,000. Recipient Adrian's personal account. The note read, "Emergency debt relief." The day before that transfer was our 3rd day as a married couple. She had told me her best friend's family was in trouble and needed a loan. I gave it. What I did not know was that her best friend was named Adrian. The second transfer, December 20th, the same year, $220,000. Recipient, the Adrian Technologies startup account. The note read, "Seed funding." That day, we were on our honeymoon in a hotel in Malibu. She got up in the middle of the night to make a phone call. She was on the phone for 2 hours. She came back and told me she was talking to her mother. I believed her. The third, the fourth, the fifth. The numbers on the screen scrolled at an unhurried pace. Every line was a slap. March last year, $450,000 in note, project advance funding. When Elena sent this money, my mother was in the hospital back in my hometown, scheduled for surgery. I told her we should go back and visit. She said work was too busy and she could not get away. She was indeed very busy. Busy running to the bank for Adrian to process wire transfers. July last year, $830,000 in note, office rent and deposit. The rent for Adrian's co-working space. My wife paid it. That same July, the air conditioning in my old Honda Civic broke down. I drove with the windows down on Marina Boulevard in the middle of summer. She said it was too hot and she did not want to ride in my car. She turned around and hailed a lift to the Silicon Valley district to bring Adrian fresh fruit. In September last year, $560,000. November last year, $390,000. January this year, $610,000. The numbers jumped across the screen. Elena's hands were shaking. The divorce papers were crumpled into a ball, then spread out again, then crumpled once more. The last transfer, March this year, $200,000. The transfer I had intercepted, recipient Adrian Technologies. The note had only 2 words, urgent need. The screen froze. The final summary number at the bottom was in red, bolded and enlarged. $27,480,000. $27 million, I said, setting the remote down on the table, looking at her. Elena, you said you want half the community property. These past 3 years, my salary sat in the account you managed. $35,000 a month. 3 years. That is $1.26 million in total. The money you transferred to Adrian is over 20 times my salary. Where do you think that $27 million came from? Elena's lips were trembling. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. You do not know, I answered for her. You never once wondered how my salary could possibly sustain the blood transfusion you were giving your ex-husband. You were only responsible for transferring the money, not for asking where it came from. Just like you were only responsible for living in the villa, and not for asking whose name was on the deed. Her voice scraped out of her throat, like something was stuck inside. This $27 million, I pointed at the screen. All of it was charged to the black card I kept in that drawer. You did not open that drawer for 3 years. If you had, you would have seen the annual fee statement for that card, and the name of the cardholder. Elena stepped back. Her leg hit the arm of a chair. The chair slid into another chair, setting off a chain reaction of metal clanging against metal. She did not steady herself. She just stood there between the 2 rows of chairs, like a tree that had been uprooted. So you cannot take half my assets, I said. My voice was flat, neither loud nor soft, like stating a fact. Because you have already spent it. $27 million. Every dollar went to your ex-husband. If marriage is a community property system, then this $27 million is your negative asset to this marriage. She lowered her head. Her hair fell from behind her ears, veiling half her face. She stared at the divorce papers in her hands. The paper had been crumpled beyond recognition. She was silent for a long time, in so long that the electronic screen automatically went into standby mode. The screen went black. Half the light in the ballroom vanished with it. Then she lifted her head. Her eyes were as red as if they had been seared with a branding iron. But not a single tear fell. She placed the divorce papers on the table, reached over, and took a pen from in front of me. In the property division section, where she had written, "No community property to divide," she traced over every single stroke of every single word again. 1 stroke at a time. Every stroke was heavy. The tip of the pen nearly tore through the paper. When she finished, she put the pen down and turned toward the door. 3 steps later, she stopped. She did not turn around. "I owe you, and I cannot pay it back." She pushed the door open and walked out. The hallway light spilled through the gap. stretching her shadow into a long, thin line. Then the door closed, and the shadow disappeared with it. Innie sat at the long table facing the darkened screen for a long time. My phone lit up. In a message from Marcus. Ms. Elena is crying in the elevator. Should I follow her? I typed 2 words. No. The divorce was finalized quickly. It was raining the day we met at City Hall, not a torrential downpour, the kind of fine, persistent drizzle like countless silver needles falling from the sky. They hit the pavement without a sound, but they could soak a person through. Elena had arrived before me. She stood on the steps holding a black umbrella. When she saw me coming, she tilted it in my direction. Innie did not take it. Innie held my own. The clerk was a woman in her 50s. She looked at the papers, then looked at us. She asked the routine question. Are you sure about this? Elena said yes first. Innie followed with yes. The clerk sighed. The seal came down with a sharp clack. The embossed stamp landed on our photo, splitting both our faces in half. When we walked out of City Hall, the rain was still falling. Elena stood under the awning, stuffing her divorce decree into her bag. She was wearing a white blouse today. The collar was neatly pressed. Her hair was much tidier than it had been the past few days. But she had lost weight. Her collarbones jutted out in 2 sharp arcs like thin blades embedded just beneath her skin. Julian, she called out to me. Her voice was nearly swallowed by the rain. Can you answer one question? I stopped walking. Innie did not turn around. Who exactly are you? The 3rd time she had asked this question. The first time was in a text message. Innie did not reply. The 2nd time was in the ballroom. Innie told her to come and find out. Now here she was, the 3rd time, standing in front of me at City Hall. Innie turned around. In rain dripped from the edge of my umbrella, forming a line of water beads on the ground between us. At that exact moment, the giant LED screen on the office building across the street lit up. It was a news channel feed. A female anchor in a sharp blazer was delivering a financial news report. Her voice carried through the rain, broken and reassembled by the sound of water. A few words were lost, but the core message was unmistakable. Breaking news. DeepSpace Capital founder Mr. Julian has reached a strategic cooperation agreement with the Nordic Sovereign Wealth Fund. The 2 parties will jointly launch a global technology investment fund with a scale of $500 billion. This marks the largest ever collaboration between a private Chinese capital firm and the Nordic Sovereign Wealth Fund. The anchor's mouth kept moving, but the sound was swallowed by the rain. A photo appeared on screen. Me, standing at some signing ceremony, shaking hands with the Norwegian Minister of Finance. Behind us was an enormous backdrop of Chinese and Norwegian flags. Elena heard it. She stood on the steps, her umbrella in hand, her head slowly turning toward the LED screen. The umbrella tilted in her grip. The metal tip poked into her shoulder, but she did not react. She stared at the photo on the screen for a long time. Then she turned back to look at me. I stood there holding my umbrella, wearing a dark grey jacket I had grabbed from my closet that morning. 3 years ago. Maybe $100. Her umbrella slipped from her hand. The black canopy flipped inside out, rolled twice in the wind, and caught on a storm drain. Rain poured down on her. Her white blouse was soaked through in an instant, clinging to her skin, the outline of her collarbones visible through the fabric, strands of hair plastered to her cheeks. Rainwater traced the line of her hair down into her collar. That was the only word she managed. I turned and walked away. The car was parked across the street. In a black Maybach, Marcus stood beside it, holding an umbrella, waiting for me. Julian, Elena shouted my name from behind me. Her voice pierced through the rain, louder than the stamp of the seal at City Hall. Innie did not look back. Julian, she shouted again. Her voice had cracked. It sounded like she had used every ounce of strength she had, tearing the sound from the deepest part of her throat. A car passed on the street. Its tires cut through a puddle, splashing up white sheets of water that shattered her voice into pieces. My hand was already on the car door. Marcus opened the rear door for me. He glanced at me, his lips parting as if to say something. In the end, he said nothing. 8 years with me. He knew when to speak and when to shut up. Inai got into the car. The moment the door closed, the sound of the rain was cut off, muffled, like listening through a thick pane of glass. The car stereo was on. It was the radio version of the financial news. The anchor's voice was still going. DeepSpace Capital has stated that this fund will focus on investments in artificial intelligence and clean energy sectors and is expected to leverage over $2 trillion in industry chain investment over the next 5 years. Outside the car window, Elena stood in the rain. She was no longer shouting. She just stood there, completely drenched, like a piece of paper soaked to pulp. Her mouth was open, but no sound came. Rainwater poured in, and she swallowed it. The overturned black umbrella was still in the gutter, pushed in a circle by the current, before it drifted down the drain and disappeared. Marcus started the engine. The Maybach's motor made almost no sound. The car glided smoothly out of the parking space, rounded the corner of City Hall and pulled away. Inai looked through the rearview mirror one last time. Elena was still standing there. The rain was getting heavier. Her figure was blurred by the water, fading until a sycamore tree at the corner blocked her from view. On the radio, the anchor was still reading the news, and her tone was smooth and professional, as if reading data that had nothing to do with anyone. But every word of that data had everything to do with Elena. And it was probably only in this moment that she finally understood. The man who squeezed onto the BART every day, who wore old jackets, who drove an old Honda Civic, who crouched outside a convenience store to hide from the rain, he had never been the person she thought he was. Mr. Julian. Marcus glanced at me through the rearview mirror.
Where to?
The office. The Maybach turned onto Marina Boulevard. The bay was shrouded in a white mist, kicked up by the rain. In the distance, the Golden Gate Bridge was faintly visible, a grey line stretched between the sea and the sky. The car was quiet, only the radio and the steady rhythm of the windshield wipers. My phone buzzed in a message from Elena. Inai opened it. In no words, just a photo. In a photo she had taken. It was the windowsill of her 450-square-foot rental apartment. On the windowsill was a small round object, catching the rain, gleaming with a silvery white light. Our wedding ring. She had taken it off in the rain and placed it on the windowsill. Inai stared at the photo for a long time. Then I turned the screen off and put the phone back in my pocket. The Maybach continued forward, through the rain, through the city, through all the yesterdays and todays. On the radio, the anchor repeated the news one more time. This time her pace was a little slower, as if to emphasize something. Julian, founder of DeepSpace Capital, a hidden billionaire who, in the past 5 years, has never granted a single media interview. Today, with a $500 billion strategic partnership, he has made his public debut to the world. I leaned back in my seat and closed my eyes. In the rear-view mirror, the City Hall building had long since disappeared from view. The rain kept falling. In San Francisco, rain was always like this, sudden in its arrival, sudden in its departure. But this particular storm, it seemed, was going to last a long while yet.